Hello, and welcome to today's special webinar event, which is a technical deep dive into Office 365 Backup. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media. I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, there are a few things you should know about this webinar. First off, we want this to be a very educational event for you, so we encourage any and all questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you will find that we're offering several resources. Those include a link for getting started with Veeam, a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center, where you can find more fantastic events like this one. So I encourage you to check those resources out now and share them with your friends and your colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. If you're watching this webinar on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. If you win, congratulations, but you can also choose to donate the value of that gift card to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media events, thousands of dollars have been donated to charity. So thank you in advance if you make that choice today. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. And finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact the prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's content. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Edward Watson, Senior Global Product Marketing Manager at Veeam, and Karen Bissett, Product Strategy Technologist at Veeam. And now, let's turn things over to Edward.
Hello, and welcome to this webinar on a technically focused, presentation, number one Office 365 Backup, Technical Deep Dive. My name's Edward Watson. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Veeam, and today I'm joined by Corinne. Say hello, Corinne.
Hi, I'm a technologist here at Veeam Software, and I'm an SME in the Microsoft Office 365 Backup product line.
Great, and we're really actually very excited to get the opportunity to talk to you today about some really great technical details that will hopefully help you jumpstart your VBO deployment, or if you're not quite ready, even just give you some great technical information to help you get started and make some decisions around the software. But before we get into all the technical goodness, let's quickly recap why exactly we choose to back up Office 365 data. So first off the list there is accidental deletion. Of course, we know that human error is still definitely a top concern in our organizations, simply because it happens so often. And we need to make sure that that risk of data loss happening because of the human error is mitigated. Retention policy gaps and confusion around those gaps. Sometimes we might even think that retention policies actually serve the purpose of a backup. And really, it's all about making sure that you have a separate copy of the data that you can recover from beyond just those limited retention policies, which, of course, those are for those legal and compliance purposes really only. Internal security threats, you know, these are instances that we see in the news that actually do happen, where we may see a disgruntled employee or maybe disgruntled consultant go ahead and cause a bit of havoc. Maybe they remove some Office 365 accounts and take off. So these things do happen, and we see those every once in a while. So we want to mitigate against that. And of course, the external security threats. We know that ransomware continues to be more and more sophisticated. And there's ways that our employees are now being tricked much easier than they have in the past in the case of things like phishing. And of course, legal and compliance. You know, many of us do have to meet legal and compliance requirements. And the question we should be asking ourselves is, do we have the recovery, the quick search and easy recovery needs that we need to have in order to quickly meet those legal and compliance requirements beyond maybe the native capabilities that Office 365 provides, which of course a third-party third-party backup solution can provide much more fast and easy ways to get that data back into your hands. Managing hybrid, of course, that only compounds a lot of the complexity involved in a lot of these issues, and of course, making sure you have a streamlined copy of the data that can work with both a hybrid deployment as well as regular on-prem or Office 365 employments. Definitely very important. And of course, the Teams data structure. Many of us are dealing with, Teams on a very wide scale, especially now that the majority of our workforce may be still remote. So this is definitely a concern, making sure that the complexity that is on the Teams backend is mitigated, and that any data loss from occurring is mitigated as well. So now that we've kind of laid the land here on kind of why we need a backup, let's dive into the solution itself. So Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365, what we're doing is we're essentially eliminating the risk of losing access to that data. Whether that's Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, or even Teams, really allowing us to have that separate copy of data backed up to really any location. And actually, Corinne's going to take us through all our various storage locations, all our various deployment options, and really allowing us to protect ourselves against all those risks I just mentioned: accidental deletion, security threats, etc. But no backup is complete without the restore. And of course, what we offer is the ability to quickly restore items and files with lots of flexibility built in. And we're going to cover how that actually looks, how that actually works, and of course, helping you meet those legal and compliance requirements that you might have, really getting that data back very quickly and allowing you the search capabilities that your business needs. So now that we've kind of laid the land there on the solution itself from a high level, let's have Corinne kind of take us through this from a deeper level on the planning stage. So how to plan your Office 365 backup. So with that, take it away, Corinne.
Thank you. Now, before I get too deep into it here, I'd like to encourage anyone that has questions, head over to our questions window and ask those as we go along. We'll try to answer questions that are relevant as we go, and anything towards the end that we can get to. So let's start off with the installation of the product. The product actually comes with a 4 installation package setup. The first installation that you'd probably like to start with is the Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 product itself, which is a Veeam Backup 365. This is going to be where you add in all your proxies. This is where you're going to do your REST API commands from the central location, as well as make your jobs, of course, and add in your organization. Next, you'll want to install the Explorers. Now, these Explorers are for restore of all of the application. Each Explorer is tailored to the application in the infrastructure so that you can get data back from those applications in a format that makes sense. I won't go too much into that right now because Edward will be covering that later in this section, but you do need to make sure you get those Explorers installed when you install the product. Next, we'll take a look at the components that get installed whenever you start off. And of course, you're going to have your backup server, which is going to, of course, aggregate your jobs, be your tasks, your schedules, all of those types of components, and even your notifications if you choose to set those up. You'll also be installed default on that same machine as a proxy. This proxy does all of the data moving. You can send this out to other machines in your infrastructure if you'd like to route traffic through a different location. That is also possible. Now, each proxy is going to have a repository that it sends data. And a proxy can have multiple repositories, but one repository cannot have multiple proxies going to that same location. So you'll have a proxy with your repositories you're sending that data to. Now, there are 2 different kinds of deployments that we look at in the infrastructure. So the simple deployment is when you first install the product. You have your backup server, your proxy, your repository, all default settings and configured on that same server. And advanced deployment is where you start to scale out those components and aggregate the workloads to different machines, like adding additional proxies with repository components attached to scale up to larger business environments. Now, the next question we usually get, where do you draw this line? And it's actually on the next slide we can see 20,000 objects per backup proxy. This means that it's about 500 5,000 users per 8 CPU and 32 gigs of RAM on a proxy for a maximum configuration. Now you can add up to 50 proxies to one centralized Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 component, which means you can scale up to 1 million objects. Now, their repository locations allow for theoretical maximums of unlimited, especially when you're using something like an object storage. Now, let's cover what is an object. An object would be, say, a primary mailbox, an archive mailbox, a personal SharePoint site, and a OneDrive for business. That's how we get an average of 5,000 users per proxy in the infrastructure, because most users tend to have all 4 of these objects whenever you deploy them to Office 365. Now, if you have additional object types, say shared mailbox, public folders, collaborative SharePoint sites, and even Microsoft Teams, those are going to generate additional components. So you'll need to take that into consideration. You won't be able to back up so many users to a single proxy if you have more than 20,000 objects total. Now, 20,000 objects is a lot of objects, which work for most small businesses under a single deployment and some lower end scale commercial business. When you start to get into enterprise level installations, you can add different objects to different jobs, sending them to different proxies. And each of these proxies would have that maximum of 20,000 objects. Even if you do have multiple organizations, you can still use the same centralized server and send those workloads off to different data entities, keeping your centralized management unit, but getting that scalability. Next, we'll cover the places that you can install the software, because it's not just your on-premises environment, which will take the installation of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365. You can actually deploy directly from the Microsoft Azure Marketplace, as well as the AWS Marketplace, to install Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 ready to go. Now, you can also install to many other public cloud providers. It just needs the ability to install a Windows machine, and then you can actually manually download the software if needed. So any type of cloud-first infrastructure components or company initiatives will allow you to still back up the critical data and gain back some control of that in the public cloud. Now, there are installations or companies that prefer more of a hands-off type of approach, and we do offer backup as a service with many of our Veeam service providers. These service providers generally provide a built-in portal and all kinds of additional components to help give your business peace of mind without needing to offload that workload onto your administrative team. Now we'll cover the types of repositories that we can connect to. Starting off at the top of the list, object storage. Object storage is the preferred repository for an infrastructure, whether you're running an on-prem environment or in the cloud, due to the nature of object storage. With it being infinitely expanding in its capacity, you're able to scale out without the worry of adding additional disk space. Now, the on-prem environments, we tend to see more of those direct connect types of repositories. But to be mindful with any on-prem type of storage that this is an active database type of connection, meaning that it needs the ability to do quick read, write, and random read, write operations to these disks. So something like a USB hard drive would not be the optimal configuration in order to store data to. Next, we have SAN. So SAN is a great configuration if you can't directly attach that disk to a device. But keep in mind, since this does have a lot of calls and operations, that you don't want to be more than about one hop away in your network to have the optimal connectivity and speed. If anything gets dropped in the way, it could cause severe performance issues. We do support SMB, but it's actually under experimental support, and it's recommended if you can do any other type of protocol, even say like an iSCSI connection, which uses more of a TCP connection versus the UDP traditionally with the SMB, you'll have a better experience in performance. An additional benefit to using something like the object storage we have at the top of the list here is due to the nature of SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business. They have a very volatile data type, meaning that once users get a hold of that, they can upload gigs and gigs and gigs of data individually, unlike traditional Exchange, which you may only see a maximum of like 10 meg per email. This explosion of data could mean that you might be scrambling on-prem to expand that storage in order to meet the backup requirements when opening up those objects to users. And it's not just users. Microsoft has started to aggregate a lot of its storage entities back end onto the collaborative SharePoint sites. So the best example, the most recent, is Microsoft Streams. Microsoft Streams now backs up to the collaborative backend SharePoint site for any teams that you're doing that stream within, meaning that you could have a random explosion of data within your SharePoint Online sites that you have to account for. So this object storage can be very beneficial in these types of scenarios. Okay. Now, once you've selected which type of repository that you're going to connect to, you want to decide what retention policy you'd like to follow. And we'll take a look at those on the next screen here. And starting off with item level retention. Item level retention is all based off of the creation and modify date of an item, meaning that if you created an item a month ago, but you've updated it in the last week, that would be within its modification date. If you set item level retention to say 2 weeks, then the files that have been updated, created, and modified in the last 2 weeks would be within this retention period. Coming over to snapshot-based retention, you're looking at an entire view of your environment. Everything in your environment is backed up in that one snap. Then, as data starts to be removed from your infrastructure, it's removed from that snap. So if you have your retention, say, set to 30 days, and you have a file that is deleted 2 weeks ago, that would still be in your backup. But if you deleted that file 2 months ago, it would no longer be in the snapshot-based retention. Last, let's take a look at all of these components we've been talking about together in the infrastructure diagram. In the center here, you can see the Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 server. This server can be deployed just about anywhere you can deploy a Windows machine, and then start aggregating the components. When you're adding in the organization, you can add in multiple organizations if you have multiple orgs, or you may have acquired a company to back up their data. You can run an on-prem, you can run an Office 365 only, and you can even run a full hybrid infrastructure from the same console. This gives you the flexibility to back up your data, but not have to learn different data and resource and entity types in order to get this data back to your end users or for any type of audit and reporting. From the same infrastructure, you're also able to back up to any type of repository that makes sense to your data type for your business. So you could have disk storage, you could have a few object storage, and even a file share depending on where you want to store that data, and you do not need to install multiple consoles. We also give you the flexibility to move that data to any repository type if your business changes their mind or the business initiative changes. So you could start off with an on-prem installation, fully direct attached storage, and then migrate up to object storage when it makes sense to the business. And like I mentioned earlier, you get your console, you get your portal, and all your RESTful APIs from the same console. And even though you did have to install the Restore Explorers separately, you're still able to launch those Restore Explorers from the console itself. And Edward will actually cover some of these unique ways you can launch these Explorers from the console. And take it away with how to back up and restore, Edward.
Great, thanks, Corinne. So you've really taken us through some great stuff there. If you haven't yet put in a question that you have, please go ahead and drop that in. We will be getting to all the questions that you have, and we'll also be doing a live Q&A at the end. So let's take a deeper look at how simple it really is to backup and restore M365 objects with Veeam. So firstly is creating a backup job. And I have to say, this is very, very easy. It's completely wizard driven. And there's 6 main steps that you're going to go through. Starting with the launching the actual job wizard, from then specifying your name, selecting the objects you want to back up, or even excluding the objects you want to back up. Go ahead and specifying your backup job proxy and the repository, and then from there specifying exactly the schedule that you want for your business. And that is very flexible as well, and we'll go into those details. So first with selecting backup job scope. So you can be really as flexible as you need to be in terms of selecting or excluding objects for your backup scope. Everything from your entire organization all the way down to individual objects. So you can see there in the create scope, you have the option to add your entire organization, but you also have the opportunity to add individual items like teams, users, and sites. You can also dynamically add. So even if you select your entire organization, you still can have the flexibility to edit down to an individual object for a specific job. Also, instead of selecting all the objects you want to back up individually, you can use that dynamic mode to dynamically add objects and exclude the users you don't want within an Office 365 group. So you have definitely a variety of ways that you can tweak this to back up exactly what you need to back up. Scheduling options, also very, very easy. So for scheduling options, you can actually create a schedule that really makes the most sense for your business and really back up as often as you need to. Everything from a daily schedule on a specific date or time, or periodically based on a schedule with nearly a continuous backup window. So you really have the option to back up as often as you need, daily at this time, or a periodically every custom option, which is very beneficial. And you have the option to offset the start time in case you have overlapping jobs. So there's even a termination window you can use as well to set up for production hours so the network isn't being used during specific hours. So definitely lots of customization here, and again, serves the purpose of making sure that you can back up as often as you need to with a very, very custom schedule, and definitely very easy to use, as you can see. So now we're going to take a look at our Veeam Explorers, and we actually have 4 main Veeam Explorers, as Corinne gave a sneak peek of earlier. And each of these are tailor-made and really built from the ground up, these specialized applications we have for each of these. So we have one for Microsoft Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, and Veeam Explorer for Microsoft Teams. And again, each of these are tailor-made for the specific application. So you can see in the case of Teams, we're really focused in on searching, finding, recovering Microsoft Teams themselves, the teams themselves, channels, tabs, posts, files. And there's really 3 major use cases that we address here. So there's the in-place and out-of-place restores. So by default, these restores provide the capability to recover data to the original location. So that's your in-place restores back to the original location. Where you need to, you can also perform restores to a different location. So that would be the out-of-place restores. So we support both for that. Browsing content, of course, we're able to support that. But what we actually do is the Explorer directs and directly reads backups to really present an entire kind of hierarchical format that you can sift through. So it's all very organized, that when you go ahead and browse that content, it's very easy to manage, very easy to navigate. And for each object, the built-in browsers offer context-sensitive options to send, restore, and export. Likewise, on the search for content, very easy and quite a sophisticated way to navigate. And really, this is your legal and compliance use case for the search for content. That's going to be where you use an advanced find functionality and really provides great e-discovery capabilities that allow you to use different criterias and match based on different data as well as metadata that you have stored. So definitely great use cases here that can address a variety of different needs. And in terms of exploring the data itself, there are four key major ways that you can actually explore the data. The first is the backup jobs themselves. You can also explore single organizations. So that would be loading the latest restore points that you have within that selected org. Also exploring all organizations. If you have multiple organizations, loads the latest restore points of each backup job of every organization. And then we have something pretty neat with exploring point in time. So you can actually use either latest available states, and that loads the latest state of items in a backup file, or you can actually use a custom, use the following point in time, so that you can actually specify exactly what date you're wanting to look within to load a backup based on that very specific date. So again, lots of customization there and lots of capabilities for exploring that data. And to quickly kind of cover the restores themselves, there's actually just 3 very simple steps to restore. So you're going to go ahead and launch your wizard there, select the restore scope, and then essentially choose whether you want to use the modern or basic. Of course, the modern will be your de facto standard, the default that we recommend, and then you would simply authenticate into your Microsoft org to conduct the restore. So 3 very simple steps in order to conduct that restore. Now that we've kind of covered, and really we're kind of tapering off the technology side of the presentation now and kind of winding down to some takeaways, but some just quick key difference makers that Veeam offers. Really, it's all about complete flexibility. As you've seen throughout the presentation, that's been a very common theme. So really, it's all about you maintaining the ownership of your data by choosing exactly how you deploy it, exactly how you store it. We don't force you into a particular storage or lock you into any kind of deployment mechanism. This is all up to you in terms of how you consume the cloud or consume your storage. Customizable backups, you can see there's many different ways where you can customize this. It's like a Rubik's Cube of various customization options that you can use and really provide whatever level of protection you need across all your users to make sure that you can meet your business objectives. And of course, we have many recovery options. We actually have 40. We have 40 plus recovery options. Everything from all the different save, send, and export options across OneDrive all the way to Teams. And again, we provide you the ability to get the data back in the way that makes the most sense for you in the formats that you're going to be using and your users are going to be consuming. And we invite you to see for yourself what our customers say. So don't take it from me or Corinne. See what our customers say. You can actually visit TrustRadius and G2 Crowd. These are third-party review sites where these are completely raw and unfiltered quotes that you can look through. My favorite one there, get Veeam Backup for M365, your boss will love you. So definitely take a look through some of these and see for yourself what some of the opinions are on Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365. And a few takeaways here before we get to the questions. We do encourage you to read up or share. We know that Teams is definitely something that's hot on the minds of everyone right now. And so we do encourage you to, of course, protect that data, first off, But then we definitely want to encourage you to read this ebook so you can see how to adequately protect that data and make sure that you can navigate through various remote transitions you may be going through. And of course, see for yourself. So you can actually take a free 30-day trial of Veeam Backup for Office 365. You can see there, you go on veeam.com and navigate to SaaS there, click on Microsoft Office 365 and hit download. And from there, it's as simple as hitting download, agreeing to the terms and conditions, and then finalizing your download. So very quickly to get up and running. And again, complete sorry, excuse me, complete functionality free for 30 days. That's what I was trying to say. And of course, we also have a community edition, which is 10 users. If you only have 10 users in your organization, you can actually get this product completely free. So 10 users or less, we have a community edition. We do encourage you to download that and download this as well. So again, some good free downloads that we have for you. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A. Do we have any questions there, Corinne?
We actually have a ton of questions if we wanted to start running through this.
Okay, so it looks like we have one up here. Can and should we install this on the same VM that we use to run our Veeam Backup?
So it's actually a great question because we get that one a lot. And the answer is preferably not, because these are two different installations of software that do not talk to each other's on the back end allocation of resources. So you'll want to make sure that you install these on separate servers so you don't run into unexpected resource exhaustion.
Okay, great. Curious, is there an option for a secondary on-prem target like in regular Veeam, already using Veeam O365, but don't remember seeing that as an option?
So if you're using the same repository as another server, I would not recommend that. Again, it's due to the same resource exhaustion. If you're asking if you can add multiple on-prem targets, of course you can add multiple on-prem targets to the server if that's what you need in your environment.
Okay, question from Tyler. Can the email portion of backup be more granular, such as only backing up emails for up to 1 week old instead of backing up emails for all time?
Yes, you can actually scale down the repository to whatever makes sense, from a number of days to forever.
Okay. Question here from Nick. We currently have 25 seats of Office 365 and use Veeam to back up locally. The server that is running Veeam has local storage. We also have removal storage that we rotate and take off-site. Is there a way to back up on both storage devices so we can take one backup off-site?
So you could use Veeam Backup and Replication to back up the Office 365 server. If there's a directly attached storage, you would do it either through agents or through VMs, depending if it's a virtual machine. This would also has an agent on the Office 365 server to get a consistent backup state if you would like to do that off-prem.
Okay, great. Can you change the retention policy once you've selected one for a repository?
You cannot change the type of retention once it's been selected for a repository. You would have to make a new repository to send that data to.
Okay. Question here from David. So if your item level retention is set to 30 days, does that mean that emails received 2 months ago will be removed from the backup?
Yes, if they have not been modified.
Okay. Excuse me. So in regards to our retention, if we set it to 30 days, it only keeps 30 days worth of changes only. What I want to know is, let's say if we need data back from 1 year from now, we basically would not be able to do so?
So the examples I gave for the retention were based off of smaller settings so that you could understand how are the differences between the two types of retention. Each retention can be set to forever, meaning you can do it for a year as well. And it sounds like you would like snapshot-based retention. and set it to a year.
Okay, great. Good question from Ray. And actually, this is a question we've been getting a few times here is this a separate module we purchase in addition to our existing Veeam Backup and Replication V10 or V11? And actually, this is a separate standalone product, Ray and others. And essentially, it was the reason we actually made it a separate product was it was a very specific use case. And so for right now, at least, it has remained a standalone product for deployment. So this is completely standalone deployment. Okay. Let's see. We have a few questions here on Google Cloud. Sometimes the capabilities are different between Google Cloud and the normal commercial cloud. Just want to make sure the solution can be used by government tenants.
So we do support GCC configuration. Some of those features are experimental just because of limited access to that type of cloud. We also have VCSP providers that provide GCC backup that might meet your compliance as well.
Yeah, good clarification there, Corinne. Thanks for that. Get a link for the Explorers. Yes, so the Explorers will be a part of that installation package, Lee. So again, if you're looking for the Explorers, we highly recommend that you go ahead and download the product. And as part of that installation package, you will have the MSI files, which are all the different various Explorers for the applications. Okay, we currently have 1 year retention, but it isn't until the end of the second year that the database size gets reduced. When will this change so that the size of the database reflects only what our retention policy is?
So that database kept until the end of the year is because their database file stored onto an on-prem configuration for those machine or for that backup data. It's hard to delete an entire database when there's fragments of files until the end of that year to take up that space. If you're concerned about space, we do recommend the object storage type of solution because it leaves a smaller on-prem footprint and doesn't leave you with that larger space you have to take up.
Okay, question here on the dedupes. I assume the backups are deduped with the regular Veeam backups?
There is actually no deduplication for these backups because of the type of database on-prem. If you do use an object storage, we use a file table for object references to the cloud, which does provide some storage efficiencies.
Okay, we have a question on Veeam supporting whether we support private channels for Teams.
Think you got this one, Edward?
Yeah, so in terms of the private channels, we do not support the private chats right now, but that's definitely on our radar, definitely something we plan to address sooner than later. How licenses are discounted? So we've had a few questions around the licensing. We are based on a per user per month basis, similar to Microsoft and the way that they charge for their O365 licenses. And we start at a $1.60 per user per month, which is quite reasonable. And of course, we offer some good discounts between if you go into the 3 to 5 year commitment range. So definitely check out our pricing page on Veeam.com on the product page there, and you can definitely work with us on the pricing directly. Okay, can we restore files from SharePoint Office 365 backups?
Yes. SharePoint is part
yes.
of that. SharePoint Online and SharePoint 2019 on-prem is supported.
Okay, this is the question we always wait for, Corinne. This is the one we get every time, which is we are currently running Veeam. Do we need to install a new server to support this type of cloud backup, or do we use our existing installation? Great question, Joseph.
Yeah, I think we actually had this one a little earlier too. You should be installing on separate machines because they are not cognizant of having resource shared between the two applications. And you can run into resource exhaustion due to that fact.
Okay, I think that takes care of quite a few questions we had out there, actually. let's see. Can I back up my M365 to my local backup storage devices that are currently used for Veeam BNR?
So along that same question line, you
Same
can.
question.
It is configurable, but again, they're not aware of each other's resource usage. So just be mindful that you could run into resource exhaustion.
Okay, does Veeam backup Salesforce data? That is definitely on our radar, and you'll see more about that sooner than later. I can tell you that. Okay, we got a few questions here. Okay, we are an SMB of about 175 running BNR and O365 on one server. Are there any tips or issues I should watch for, especially since the repos do not see each other? So same along the lines of the same question, I think, but I don't know if there's any tips around that.
Just keeping them on separate servers is kind of a blanket statement for these kinds of things.
Right. Yeah, we just recommend they be separate servers. Okay, if you already have VBO set up, but now you have the option to back up SharePoint and Teams, do you need to do anything different, or just edit the existing organization and select the services you want to protect?
Just use the existing organization and you can select the services that you need to protect.
Okay. Question here from Brad. Can you have different retention policies for different Exchange folders?
For different folders, no, it's based off of a user.
Does Veeam Backup, is it a daily full backup or just backing up the changes from there?
It just backs up the changes. It's always incremental data.
Okay. From Scott here, okay to install VBO server on the non-domain joined server?
Yes, and you can even add proxies that are not domain joined at this time too. You can add them all based on a work group.
Okay. From here, is the SharePoint list an item that can be backed up and restored? I'm not sure if that was clear.
I think the question is asking, are you able to back up and restore individual items? You would back up the entire SharePoint list, but you would have the granularity to just restore the items that you need to or the list that you need to.
Okay. How do you back up Teams? So this is actually something that requires a bit of an explanation. Are you ready to give that explanation, Corinne?
So Teams is actually not a self-contained application. There are many different backend entities to back up Teams. We currently are able to tap into the Teams metadata for shared types of Teams and collaborative site Teams data. Anything that is a file exchange between two users is actually backed up in OneDrive for Business. And Exchange holds the personal chat files for all users. So that data is backed up, but the only thing that we're able to restore back to the original location at this time is going to be those collaborative teams.
Okay, great explanation. If you restore an email from a user's deleted folder in Veeam, will it restore to their deleted folder?
You can select to restore it back to that deleted folder, or you can select to restore it back to the folder it came from. So there's different ways that you can restore that data.
Okay, question from Nick. Which is better, item level or snapshot level retention?
It all depends on what you require for your infrastructure, which is why we offer both of those to our end user.
Okay, it looks like I want only Teams. I need to check SharePoint. What if I only want O365 and Teams, no SharePoint? Do I need to create a new org?
No, you can actually select just to have Teams in the organization, and we're only going to back up what you configure within your job. So you can select a job to back up only Teams from your entire organization.
Okay, any recommendations for someone that needs to keep a copy of terminated user emails for several years?
So whenever you have a terminated user, we will keep the backup of that data for whatever you've defined for that retention period. So you're able to back that up.
Okay. Is restore to another O365 tenant supported?
Not at this time.
We have one here from Brad. Thanks for keeping these questions coming in, guys. We'll close out soon, but I think we have some good questions here. Does Veeam monitor and report detail about your Office 365 backup jobs and repository?
So there is reporting within the console for you, but we don't tap into the console ourselves to report on any of your data, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Are there any file type exclusions for backing up SharePoint sites?
Not at this time.
Okay. Can I use the community edition for my home backups? That's a good question.
Of course you can.
Yes, absolutely.
We encourage it.
Absolutely. Is there a recommended maximum number of backup threads to use or a formula to determine the optimal number we should use?
It's all going to vary based on your environment. Most of the time, you don't need to configure your threads anymore because we've built in some compatibilities with Microsoft's backend data entities to do load balancing and throttling. Any types of modifications to your threads, I highly recommend getting with our support team to make sure you're chasing the right issue in the organization.
Okay. We also had a question, Corinne, about our self-service portal, a restore portal capability. So in fact, I think you even at Veeam gave us a little sneak peek of what's coming in version 6. So self-service restore portal is coming as part of that, isn't it?
Yep, if you want to take a sneak peek at what we showed off, if you go to veeamon.com and look for the technical general session on day 2, you'll see me demoing that portal for everyone.
Great. Okay, I think we have a lot more questions to answer here, folks. I think we're going to go ahead and answer these post-presentation, unless you'd like to take a few more, Corinne.
I think we'll be able to get these answers out to the end users post-presentation. We do really appreciate all of the participation that we saw. It's been a great session.
Yeah, thank you all for the questions. Again, we will be reaching out to you individually with the answers, so we definitely appreciate the engagement, folks. We hope you did find this helpful, and again, we'll get to those questions, and we hope you have a great.
Okay, and before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business. It's the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $300 Amazon gift card is Anna Burrell from California. So congratulations to Anna. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Edward and Corinne for putting together a really informative presentation and for all the insights in the Q&A. I'd also like to thank Veeam for making this event possible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you for attending and for your many, many great questions. So that concludes today's technical deep dive into Office 365 Backup. Have a great rest of your day.